Oh man, that's amazing. I think that actually you don't need to have A and B. I think you could just have B after A. I think it works perfectly with the way that the mock-up played it. Well, Jon Martin, I I've been looking at this, studying this score on and off for the past few months. Now I'm going to give you my thoughts about it. So you're using a lot of special effects and cool little things and so on, and sometimes they work really, really great. Um, Sometimes, maybe it's a little much, and some of the markings are, I think, like a little unnecessary. Like for instance, here you're going, like, okay, piano crescendo to parentheses mezzo piano. I don't even think you need the mezzo piano in there. And you go diminuendo, and then you say, by the way, this is piano, right? So I think you could just get rid of both of these. And here you say P A P dim, so poco a poco diminuendo. All you need is just I mean, I get what you're doing. You're saying, like, oh, we're getting softer. And then suddenly we go down to niente here. But, as long as your English horn player is playing this beautiful, gorgeous, luscious line, the niente is like completely, like nobody's going to be paying any attention to it. So I would say just like don't bother marking niente like this unless like it is an actual special effect, right? That everybody is going to notice or pay attention, or it's like it's part of the fabric. Well, look, let's not start in the middle of E. Let's back up here and yeah, we're gonna start from E and work our way forwards. All right, senza vibrato. First thing, just to kind of comment on, I know you're sort of thinking about like ranges of instruments here, like B flat clarinet, tenor saxophone, and then bass clarinet. But I really prefer the clarinet family together and then the saxophone underneath it. It's just, organizationally better for me to comprehend. And I think that most conductors would agree. And they might even want the saxophone under the bassoon, as it is in some French scores. But I think, standard is to keep the families together. So keep the flutes together, keep the oboes together, keep or the oboe family together, keep the clarinets together, and then have the tenor saxophone under the clarinet. And it really kind of is its own family. It's not like an extra clarinet. And then the bassoons. All right. And here you go, diminuendo to parentheses piano. Oh, look, you are the god. You are the god of this piece, right? You make the decisions. You don't have to apologize or say, oh, by the way, maybe this is, you know, usually when somebody puts parentheses on a marking, it's because it's like the suggestion is that this may or may not have been what the composer intended, right? But you don't need to do that here because you are in complete control. This is your moment to decide what to do. So, so there's that. And then you've got some other effects here. You got the feathered beam and so on. And yeah, with the way that you already have, I'm guessing this is two parts, or like you have divisi, yeah. So the top part is ordinary, and then the bottom part is tremolo ad lib. Okay, all right. So the problem here is that with the standard part, and especially with like the doubling on that same pitch, on that same B by all the other instruments, the nobody's really going to hear the tremolo or the the intensity of what you've got here. Maybe if you didn't have the maybe if you didn't have the standard dotted whole note right here, and then the effect of noticing the feathered beaming here, that approach. You have this big crash here on the tam tam. So so just kind of information, kind of worth thinking about is, you've got all of the like everything in Norse, I believe. So look, like the thing about it is that like I can understand it because my dad was a professor of German language studies, and he did his master's thesis was on the Poetic Edda, right? So I was sort of saturated in Teutonic languages and Scandinavian culture and stuff like that. It was sort of something that I kind of grew up with, and there's still a lot I don't understand. Some certain words that you're using and so on. Probably just to kind of give me a little bit of there's just only so much time I can put into studying different scores and trying to figure out what's meant and so on and so forth. So, you being much more versed in my language than I am in yours, and also just all of the viewers out there who want to know what you're doing with your score. Maybe if you could have things like in their standard, Italian and English and French terms, it would really, really help me. Just it's like, not to say that you shouldn't have it in the language that perhaps an orchestra is going to play it. That's perfectly fair. I just absolutely understand that. But just like the thing about your score is that it is massively finessed with so many different instructions all over the place. So that just makes it kind of harder for me to quite grasp exactly what you mean in a lot of places. And then the other thing too is that I prefer a standard here where at the beginning of each line I know exactly who is going to be playing at any given time. Now you're of course you're welcome to change that, but like for instance here, I don't know who this is, right? So if you were maybe to put a marking at the beginning of the screen or at the beginning of the staff back here, it would be hugely helpful in reading and studying your score. All right, so getting back to E, of course the entire idea here was to fade out. Like the piano fades out, and the pianist lifts the fingers on the keys that aren't going to be used going forward, and then the remaining B octaves keep going. So you've simulated that pretty well, but I just have to put in that like a little bit of the effect of the diminuendo is spoiled a little, I feel, by just having this massive crash here in your percussion, right? So it's so like if things are fading away, but we kind of don't notice the fade because there's this big crash here, and then that also obscures the this feathered kind of sound right in here. Yeah, but I mean, I do really, really like the fact that this continues on. And once again, like you're fading off to niente, but you don't really even need that. Just put triple P at the end, right? Because like if the entire audience's attention was focused on the niente, that would be great. But it's not. It's focused on your soloists here. So as long as there is anything going on that is more interesting than the niente, don't use it. So that would be my basic rule. Now, because like what will really happen here, if you mark this triple P instead of niente, you'll get exactly the same effect because the players are just fading out under a solo, right? The same exact thing. Fade out to triple P, let go of it. It will be the same exact effect. But like taking it down to the absolute finest point, the edge of audibility, right? That should be something where really it is an effect for its own sake, right? So please, just everybody, just don't overuse niente. Just really put it in places where the fade is the purpose of the passage. And I don't think you're going to need to mark bowings at all, right? So, I mean, this would just really be obvious. If you really want these individually bowed rather than having them slurred, then, up, down, up, down. This is just completely obvious to the player. And they are going to, they might use some of your bowings and so on. Like right here, for instance, you mark an up bow on a down beat where we need a nice long down bow here, which fades off to pianissimo, right? So are you saying 2 up bows in a row and a down bow? This is a place where the concertmaster would cross this off and just leave it blank, because everybody would know that this needs a down bow. Down, up, down, right? Fade. And then here, there might actually be a change of bow to push into this crescendo here. So, I would say just this is why we should leave all those decisions to the concertmaster. They know what they're doing. They are way better string players than you and I, probably. Although, who knows? Maybe I'm talking to the concertmaster of the local national orchestra or something. So in that case, apologies. You obviously would know what you're doing better than me. But things like this, like this would also be really obvious. Right, this up bow here. So it just goes without saying. It's the kind of thing that sight read, a note preceding the downbeat would just automatically be thought of as an up bow. All right. Yeah, and here we've got like triangle in a triangular note head, which is very, very fun. You don't need that. All you need is a standard note head dealing with a concert players, And here, celesta is very nice. So, look, I'm just really getting distracted by all the minutia. So, I think like the best option for me to do here is to really focus on the most blatant, the most obvious parts of the scoring. That whether they work, balance, everything like that, whether they have the correct proportions and everything else, and then I'll comment on the little stuff around it as best I can. Okay. So right in here, I like the way that the cellos are going up here to tremolo and a subtone on the tenor saxophone. So I'm not sure how easy it is for a saxophone player to crescendo from a subtone and then back down to niente. I mean, I know that like subtones have some dynamic flexibility to them, but I correct me if I'm wrong, saxophone players. I believe that the subtone is achieved with a certain kind of embouchure and a certain kind of approach, and I would love for you to tell me how flexible that is, like going from a subtone to a louder dynamic and then pulling it right back to nothing. I seem to remember hearing once or talking once to a saxophone player and saying that that's kind of difficult. So, yeah. But just, that's something I'd want to consult with a saxophone player with. So, yeah, once again, I'm getting distracted by the minutia. So, going back to the score, so the whole question is whether or not these sounding Bs, it's kind of nice. I might actually recommend slurring the first 2 notes and then articulating, right, rather than slurring down to a drop. I mean, it's certainly nothing that a player can't do, but like here you're going a tenuto accent. So you really want to do that at the end of a breath, right? Yeah, and of course, like with the tenuto marks, it is all portato, right? So it's more of a pulse, you know. So I mean, you just kind of have to decide whether that is what you want, like the portato pulse, when you get to the bottom. Just kind of more to think about for the player. And then here you're slurring, like you're playing portato and you're slurring up to an accented staccato. Shouldn't that be tongued, right? Now, the whole question here is of balance, right? So we need to keep this upper part here in the background, and we need to keep the horns and to a small degree the trombones here more in the foreground. I would say the octaves need to be in the foreground. The trombones need to be sort of around it. But like there is, I would say here, there's actually a really nice balance because the strings are going to be playing a little softer anyway than the horns, just because of their natural, like the natural way that they sound. And then, the horns are going to play out, and so are the trombones. So I mean, so even at a softer dynamic in octaves, beautifully somber. The thing that I'm more concerned about here is losing the implied leap. Da 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 da. Da, da, right. This is very, very clear in the piano performance, right? And that is really why it's marked doloroso, right? So, to really get that doloroso sound, I think that you need to go more than poco here. I think if you're going to push here with a 4, with A4 horns right in here, then I think that you need to have more emphasis on these thirds. At least, I'm not so sure about this, but right up here, I would say this I'd mark tenuto, and maybe mezzo forte as well, just to really bring home that the way that the line is changing places, right? So instead of the lower melody, Barvinsky is taking it up higher, and then that is justified in the piano score, as you see. The whole ya da da dum, this all this stuff that happens afterwards is not those octaves anymore, right? I love the little clang here from your chimes. That's really nice. So yeah, and muted strings and so on. Yeah, and you have really specific ideas of what string that you want playing, and I think that, like, to a degree, like a lot of this kind of goes without saying. Like, you're thinking, well, I don't want to slur up to the A string. I want the player to play in a higher position, and I think that would kind of happen anyways, right? It's like, if this E were played on the 4th string, and then you're going up a 6th to the 3rd string, is just really, I think works fine. Yeah, so like you got a little bit of yeah, you got a little bit of instructions there that I don't understand. And also the size on the score is very small, so it makes it also hard to, if you could put that in English or in Italian, or whatever, like a more universal marking, it would really be helpful for me and the other viewers. It'd be great. Yeah, and here, so I think that like if you're just saying poco, and then you're getting to mezzo piano, it sort of seems to go against it, right? So a poco crescendo from piano is almost like, it's like a little bit more, but it's not really quite mezzo piano, is it? Right? And then here saying, by the way, parentheses, mezzo piano. Just tell us what it is. You don't need to put the parentheses on. And then diminuendo. Yeah. Yeah, and just very, very soft background here, which leads to English horn in here. Yeah, so I mean, yes, I mean there's lovely percussion scoring in here. Some great stuff. Yeah. And then you've got yeah, I mean, I think that this all works fine pretty much. The horns in here. I think I think I would mark the horns and the timpani here. You're saying dolce. I mean, I don't know how dolce it could be, but I think that the horns and the timpani here should be marked piano, and I think they really need to stay under, especially considering the range. Right, the bass clarinet is going to be crossing the range of these horns, and horns have a tendency to soak up the resonance of the instruments around them, right? Like they blend really well when they're all in the same pitches, but especially since they're so much stronger than the bass clarinet, I would definitely mark them down a little bit. Yeah, and this is all lovely. You've got that little salzedo fingernail effect. Yeah, and Celesta. Yep. Yeah, shaker. Just you don't have to put quotation marks there. It's a shaker. Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean that all works fine for me. And then this is just really really fun. Okay. Just kind of jump back to this one little point. Here you use bisbigliando, and I feel that everything is just not quite soft enough for this to work. It's funny the mock-up didn't know what to do with it, so it almost sounded like a really soft snare drum going da 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 da, you know. But I don't really feel that like the effect, just like with the way that everything is set up here, and especially how low your bisbigliando is. If it were like maybe 2 octaves higher, and maybe you were doing it between octaves, right? Like you had the same thing set up as octaves, kind of going both back and forth between two hands. Like one hand would be playing a B octave, and the other one would be playing a C flat octave. Yeah, so 2 octaves higher. I think you would be able to hear it. But here, like sitting right over the same exact pitch in your violas and having it crossed by this melody, it's almost as negligible in impact as Niente is here, right? But look, I mean, all that stuff, all that sort of little nitpicking aside, I think you kind of already, sending me this score that like for me to really unpack absolutely everything that you have in here would take like probably 3 or 4 hours, and we don't quite have that time. But like the heavily that the thing about it is what's great. What we do have is we have other viewers, other orchestrators. Some of them might be more experienced in working with some of the effects that you have got scored here, and maybe more experienced in some of the language that you're using and so on. So perhaps they can chime in and help me out with some of the analysis here and some points that I am either missing or just neglecting to talk about just for lack of time. But yeah, and then here you have Bisbigliando again. I think that it would be good to sort of suggest a kind of an alternating pattern between the hands, right? Like whether you're having like the hands just kind of go over the same pitches. So like maybe have like a pattern, set up a pattern with the left hand and the right hand kind of going to the right hand, and then just say bisbigliando after that, right? Because otherwise the harpist will completely figure out what to do, and it might not be what you want. Now back to the D section. So one thing I would say here is that like there is a certain like I really feel, Jon Martin, that you could have used more information from the piano interpretation, right? Rather than the score. Like the score is actually has like if you there seems to be a tradition of performing this piece. I've heard several other interpretations of it, and they all have a built-in acceleration and intensification of the tempo, right? And I feel that lacking that, the things start to feel very laid back, and they don't really build too much towards the more intensifying sections, right? Especially getting to right here. Just a comment I would really love to like instead of the numbering the bars like a work to be like a work for a recording session. Just put the number of the bar right here, right? It's just easier like with the eye of the conductor and like score reader, concert score reader in my case, just like flicking back to here just immediately and making calculations and so on and so forth. Yeah, I know you're thinking, well, why do you even need that when I'm numbering every bar down here? But it's it's just easier, less clutter on the page. If we take this away, then I can increase the size of the score image even farther and so on. But all that aside, I just feel that the tempo right here, and the problem here is that you have built in certain things that work better with a slower tempo. So, like, let's say that we amped up the tempo to where I feel that it should be, then I think that like a lot of this stuff becomes maybe slightly too fast to play, or I mean, it is still possible, but it just will feel just incredibly rushed, things like this. So so I would say just go back to Violina Petrochenko's interpretation of this, and just like listen to how she how she plays around with the tempo a little bit, and then starts to pile it on, and just it gets more and more intense and faster until finally that middle section, the middle of D, is just crashing away furiously, right? So I'm missing the fire. I'm missing like the intense passion and insanity, and and overspilling of whatever it is Barvinsky is trying to express here. Angst, teen angst, from a virtuoso composer. So here you say, yes, the bass trombone lead sue me. Well, look at it doesn't really care. It doesn't matter what I think. Like it doesn't it doesn't affect me in the slightest. Whatever you want to score here, who is going to sue you are the people who are working on their parts who cannot be heard because of the brightness of that bass trombone up there, right? And it's also just like a question of like where do your like what kind of orchestra are you going to get for this, right? With the intensity and complexity of the scoring, you really have cut out a lot of, I'd say, semi-pro community, even some city orchestras probably would really have a lot of practicing to put into this to get it absolutely perfect, right? And I mean, sure, any decent bass trombone player should be able to get up fairly high, but like, will their sound be all that great, right? It's just a question of, it has a tendency to become somewhat ponderous, somewhat plaintive, somewhat kind of aggravated sounding. Whereas, for just a standard tenor trombone, it plays that same area with a kind of, just kind of beauty, and like an alto trombone would be fantastic there, right? Have you considered that? What if the bass trombone was playing this F sharp and so on, the lower part of this third, and this was being played by an alto trombone, right? If you added that to your scoring here, and you have a chimbasso, and that's really really fun. So, but of course, that's going to really brighten the sound right in here. Like without that more foghorn sound of the tuba, it's going to be very very fat. Right now, you're marking it mezzo piano. What if it were just piano espressivo, right? And then everybody else we're playing piano and mezzo piano around it, depending on what their part was doing. I have a slight problem with the way that you're interpreting the pattern here, like these continuing octaves. We already did that, right? That already happened back here. Could have been better supported, and I'll address that in a minute. But like you're continuing on with the pattern here, and what that does is it takes away the effect of the cascading, right? So the way that Barvinsky has got it set up in his piano score, I know that is a phrase that you're probably going to find annoying after a while. But the way that Barvinsky has it set up in his piano score is that the octaves just sort of drift down, and you'd even fill them in with more middle winds so that they all connect, going all the way down. And if you continue like more than just like a little touch of bass, the way that he's got it in the score, sort of on the second beat of the baton, then I feel that like we sort of lose the sense of the cascade. It's just like, oh well, these are dropping down a little. Yeah, okay. But like when the cascade goes all the way from top to bottom, it just has this wonderful magical effect. So I think the beginning of this, continuing with the octaves, takes away that effect to a degree. Yeah. Yeah, and you are really well supporting that thump, right? So, here you say sotto voce and so on, like, sue you? No. These people are going to point at you and say j'accuse, right? Because nobody will be able to hear their beautiful little artificial harmonics because the overtones of your bass trombone here is just going to drown out a lot of the subtlety that's above it, right? So, you'll still be able to hear your cascading upper winds right in here, your flute family members, and mixing them, adding the celesta and so on, and harp. I mean, that's all good. I would just mark a full value right here. This is a bit unnecessary. It's just more clutter on the page, right? This actually means the value of a quarter note. This means the value of a quarter note, the way that the harpist is playing, right? This means the value of a dotted quarter note. So just write them in. Save the clutter. Like, if there were one critique that I would have to say about your entire approach here, and this is not intended to be pejorative or accusatory in any way, but I would say that like a lot of the little details that you've added in add an enormous amount of more things to look at on the page. Now, if those decisions, if those additions, if those touches are justified, then that is perfectly fine because that is the way a modern score should look, right? But I think that you can go too far with it, right? Like, for instance, I think that this is just completely unnecessary, right? And then you also have to ask yourself, like, with this weight of lower heavy brass in the sound picture, how much can we really hear anything going on lower in the harp? Really, it's very much it's almost impossible to hear. Like, really, the weight here will really be in the bassoons, right? And then also you haven't helped anything by marking this piano, right, rather than say like mezzo forte, like which really like the touch, the pluck of the harp strings, the touch of the celesta player will all have to be firmer in order to contribute here, especially with the strength of the bass trombone up here on this line, right? So I mean, look, I mean, it's not a big issue. I mean, you're kind of making a joke here, and that's fine. But I mean, you knew it was going to be a problem, so that's the problem, right? And also these beautiful little touches here. Like, see, like if this had been like maybe tenor register bassoon or English horn or very soft tenor saxophone, then those same issues of overtones would have been not a problem at all. And all of these beautiful, clear little things, you have a little trill here and then snap pizzicato and so on. It's just lovely ideas. Fantastically great. And it beautifully underlines the cascading octaves and so on. I love it. It's great, right? So, like if you want to build a fairy castle out of tissue paper that sounds fantastic, don't put a Mack truck in the middle of it. This would be my advice. Okay? It's such gorgeous scoring here. There's like absolutely no question. It's so beautifully done, right? So this would just have to come down to piano espressivo at the very, very least. Okay, and don't worry about parentheses dynamics. Just score the dynamic, okay? All right, and then here you start bringing in these little flights, which get more and more intense as we go. And, I don't think that they really add a whole lot to the basic orchestration, so I'm not going to pay that much attention to them, except to say that if you do amp up the tempo, as I think that the drama that you are trying to express here demands, right? The dramatic potential here is being hamstringed by the slowness of the tempo. It's just almost agonizing here, getting towards the end, and just hearing how beautifully you've set this up and how slow it is. There is an increase of tempo built into the performance, and this is really, really, really important. Everybody out there listening, it's why you absolutely must listen to a first-class performer of the piece, interpreting it in the style that it is understood to be at its truest form, right? And I've made a huge effort throughout all these years to just bring like the absolute best person I could think of into the game. Sometimes there's a great recording on IMSLP that I've used, like last year with the Faya. That pianist had it down perfectly, and I felt that, like, in some ways his performance was a lot cleaner than Alicia de la Rocha's. But he was obviously inspired by her, so it was almost a cleaned up version of her of her version, which is beautiful and fiery and romantic more than it is impressionistic, but still, it has a lot of impressionism in. And then this year, I was so lucky to get Violina Petrochenko, right? So just like, let that be your guide. Absolutely, please. And like your guide into adding these wonderful, beautiful touches. See, like I feel that this goes along with her interpretation really beautifully, but perhaps like, a little faster would work good. So like you can still have this ritardando, but then push up into a slightly faster tempo, and then really gaining speed, and gaining more speed after the allargando, until finally it's just a riot of sound. But what will that do to these massive, to all of this riffing around, right? It's just the question. Like, how will that, what effect will that have? So, since it isn't really playing a huge part in the architecture going forward, I'm going to mostly not spend a whole lot of time in it. It's just sort of to observe that it is interfering with the cascading octaves, right? So we've had 4 bars of cascading octaves. Here we get to the 5th and 6th bars, and in the score, this is where the octaves drop. But that's a trap, I would submit to you, because the dropping of the octaves is something that is happening so that it's easier for the pianist to play. But it's not something that is happening because it has to happen, right? So there's no need for you to obey that dropping of the octave. You could keep your clarinet up there, right? You could elevate things higher and just keep the interest on those upper pitches, even with all of this riotous abandon happening above. I have to say, it's a very, very, very nicely put together, right? And see, and then here you come back to it when it goes back up to the octave. What if you never left? What if it were all still cascading downwards? Yeah, and this sort of continues on, and then we're adding, right, the dun da 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 da. Yeah, this celesta right in here. I guess glissandos and so on. Yeah, and then the other elements continue as they should. So that all pretty much works for me. I would say at this point, when you get up to the mezzo forte with your heavy brass all together, that's the point at which a lot of stuff gets blown out of the water. This is really barely going to be audible, and all of these beautiful, all of this calculations in here, and especially lower register harp. I mean, it's dropping this stuff down, including the celesta. It is erased immediately. It might be better just to keep the harp octaves, like the upper part of it, just as high as possible. Same with the celesta. Same with kind of doing this stuff. And I think that, putting in a harp harmonic here against this, right? How can this do anything when you have got you've got your first trumpet up here blasting away on that same sounding F sharp, right? What chance does this note have to accomplish anything, right? So it seems to me like at times you have two separate scoring styles. You have a scoring style that would be absolutely beautiful for the most delicate approach possible, and then you'll have a scoring style which is more, more full-blooded, richer, maybe brutal in places, right? So you just have to watch out, which one do you go for, right? Even here, piling on you're saying distant, but I mean, how distant can we be going up to that high G sharp, right? Which is right in the strong register, the strong high register of the horn. And there will be a huge weight on here with 3 horns sitting on this line here. So, that further complicates the middle register of the orchestra, and will start to blast away the functions of these octaves and these beautiful calculations that you have in here. So watch out. All right, so now we're going to the big Ravel chords, right? And here I think you're absolutely wise in going just straight to octaves here. Okay. And yeah, I think that this bracket here is very, very fat. I don't think you need that fat of a bracket to indicate non-divisi. But you could just say non-div, right? Okay, and so you're saying molto vibrato to ordinario and so on. Yeah, so that's all fine. Yeah, I mean, it's a touch. Will anybody notice it? Will anybody notice that effect when you have got your B flat trumpet just blasting away on that same note, right? And all of these flurries going on in these other instruments, the oboe up here and so on, and yeah, so and flurrying down to the same B, and I mean it's a great way to like make sure that at least the sound of the strings projects a little bit. But look, mid-range harp here, arpeggio. So I mean and then here like you have a non-arpeggiando octave here. So this octave is toast basically. Like nobody's going to hear this. A little bit of this roll is going to come through. So like if you really wanted this stuff to sound to make a meaningful contribution to the sound picture with all this chaos happening, you need to pitch it as high as possible and have it as much rolled as possible, right? And the celesta, highest possible notes, right? So yeah, so this is kind of in the more to the mid-range of the celesta, right? So just as high as you can possibly go in order so that it comes over the top of the sound picture with all this. But I mean, even with that, it's not going to come through. Now, here in the bassoons, it's like this is like the approach that you had before. Now it works, right? Now this is much more in keeping with Barvinsky's intentions, except for one thing, and that is that they are woefully underpowered. Right now, I mean, I love what you're doing in here with just I mean, you've got some cool stuff happening here in the bass, but I feel like these parts are fighting with each other, right? They don't support one another. They don't interlock in a way that brings out the meaning of both functions, both simultaneous functions. Look, just choose one or the other and stick with it and make that part the stronger part, I would advise. I mean, it's almost like when you have all this stuff going on above, it's almost negligible. I mean, like, who cares what's happening there, right? But you should care, right? You should pick out which one of these you're going to go with. I almost feel like you should do this, right? You should focus on this more than this, because right in here you have this lovely, the leaping of the octaves and so on up into, and here it's much more strengthened, just really, really nicely done. But here, not so much. But, once again, I like the octaves in here. I like the, just using very simple scoring right in here. The trumpet playing along with the second violins, bits and pieces of notes right in here, like in between you're ripping around is covering the first violin and above, adding yet another octave from time to time with the piccolo. Yeah, and then here you're saying, oh, by the way, you could play like this. What this sort of sounds like is, you can play E again here if you would rather not play the G, right? If you don't have 5 kettles, that's what that suggests to me. Yeah, right. And here you say like secco with these 2 caesuri. I would treat the caesura more as a mark, as a universal mark that implies an universal pause, right? I would say just I know that there are technically instances where you can use it in this fashion, but all you need to do is secco. This is like what you're doing here is, I think, redundant, right? You don't need to do it twice. Just say secco, that is enough. And you can just like put a staccato on it, and not even say secco. Like that's the same meaning, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and this is so cool right in here. Yeah, but like, look, I mean, you're taking huge pains to just really make sure that everything really lines up here, harp and it's a non-arpeggiando. Thinking, yeah. So it's going to be like you're basically, yeah. So you've got I'm looking at this very carefully because your ledger lines don't really line up with your staff lines, right? So this actually looks like it's farther apart than it is. It's only an octave. Yeah, so I mean that's doable, a non-arpeggiando there. But I mean the question is like how much is that going to contribute to the sound picture? Because like even though you are taking a lighter approach here, like after this big explosion of sound, you go down to mezzo piano and so on. I would say unless you bring your brass down to piano here, then a lot of what the harp is doing here is pretty much wasted. Right, and also it's kind of covering even at piano, it's covering a lot of the subtlety. It's just a matter of like what what kind of a sound do you want to get out of the orchestra, right? So you can have sounds that sort of balance, right? That, like, you'd say that, well, the functions are clearer because we've taken pains to balance them, but the effect of the overtones, sort of smothering subtleties about the sounds of the softer instruments, right? That's always the risk. And I feel that some of that is going on here, especially in the lower trumpets and and your horns right in here. Yeah. Just watch out, man. Watch out. And then you have this like little burst here of mezzo forte. So yeah, so here we are going into the big repeated chord section, and you know what I think is so unique about this score is how lightly you deal with this section. Like, instead of having it being this constant hammering all the way through, you really treat it as a texture that progresses bit by bit, right? And you've got this big build built into it, right? And then you ease off on the pressure here, while maintaining the intensity, right? So that is all just fantastic. Oops, went the wrong way. Yeah, I mean, really nice work. Yeah. Yeah, and just once again, I would really like to know the name of the instrument, of the percussion instrument here at the beginning. Or you could put it over each new appearance of the instrument, on the page, or just put it like at the beginning, kind of that German publishing style, if you want to do that. But I just really need to know the name of each instrument from the beginning of the page. Yeah, and like, yeah, just so like, when you do that, when you have this lighter handed approach, like, a lot of problems that I've seen earlier in the score start to go away. Like, here the melody is beautifully interpreted here. The combination of the clarinets and the tenor saxophone, you know, and the celesta, like, it is a nice combination, and it leads forwards beautifully without too much encumbrance. The horns from below could use a little bit of moderation. If this is playing mezzo forte, this should play mezzo forte, I feel, and that way the bassoons here will be much clearer, and so will the celesta, really. And all of this fluttering around here is fine. Is really gorgeous. Yeah. So yeah. So like your your climactic piece here, your climactic section will be will absolutely be your climactic section here will definitely have a huge amount of impact, but it won't be unnecessarily blasting, right? I mean, I love the use of like secco timpani, it's really nice. Yeah. I don't know, like, I mean, how secco can you stay pushing towards a fortissimo, right? I think you should just say, like, when you get to here, you should just say norm. Yeah. You don't have to put it in parentheses, man. The player will remember it. So I'm kind of not sure if this is. Yeah, so it sort of almost feels like a crescendo, the way that you have this dashed line. Yeah, you don't really need to do that. You know what I mean? Just, it is what it is, and then when it starts to become normal, mark it. Yeah. All right, and here you say tuba. Yeah, tuba ataba or tuba atabasa. So, anyways, I mean, it doesn't matter. Yeah, you're not going to get you're not going to get atabasa there. Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're saying like, okay, so the tuba could go up and double here on this. Look, it's fine. It's everything that you scored here. I think it all works. It's fine. You don't have to worry about that. And here you're saying fortissimo, and then you cut down to forte almost immediately. It's all good. Now here you're saying poco arpeggiando. Yeah, I mean, look, if you're willing to accept that the celeste is mostly going to disappear right in here, then it's fine. You might actually be better off just like playing, doubling this in octaves. Now the other thing too is that like so far, like a lot of your alto flute scoring is basically things that I would have scored for clarinet, or for standard flute, just because you get more power and the color blends better with the kind of the ferocity or the radiance of the different places that you've scored. But look, I think this is a thing that you can only find out for yourself. Like, let's assume that you go ahead and get this performed and everything else. You really find that the alto flute scoring just really got sucked into the rest of the texture, and those parts that maybe you felt that you would hear a little more clearly didn't quite have the oomph that you were expecting. So, I mean, I would just as soon as you had like an E flat clarinet player or just a third clarinet or fourth clarinet, and just gave them some of the alto scoring. I think they would just work better. But I mean, like if it would work, it would be fantastic. And like I think like in some of these places, if your trumpets weren't so darn loud, then I think you would hear some of what's going on in here. Like if your trumpets were like, say, mezzo forte or something, and like along with your horns. But see, like that erases some of the excitement. So let's say your first horn was forte and your accompanying horns were like more like mezzo forte or so on, and the trumpets were mezzo forte in here, then I think that the alto flute would be much more audible. But like, look, it's just so easy. Just give it to clarinet, right? And you get more or less, you get a very similar timbre, and and more strength, and and actually just really beautiful bright color, as opposed to kind of the slightly hollow color of the alto flute up there. I mean, it's like I love the entire range of alto flute timbre. It's just like its use in big tutti passages like this is a little, is a little dubious. Yeah. Yeah, poco diminuendo. I mean, it's just a diminuendo, isn't it? Down to forte. Yeah, and then I mean, like, and here you're dropping your piccolo, further and further down into its weaker and weaker register. Here's a place where I would have had this played by first, and then like this part played by the second, and this part played by the by like a clarinet, and I think that this would work out really, really beautifully. And then and right in here, right where you really need the weight on this G, the sounding G. It's being given to a much weaker instrument right in here. Yeah, I mean, and especially just what the actual clarinet is doing in here. But I mean, you actually get stronger in here and then fade out. Yes, sforzando piano, crescendo molto to piano. Yeah. So here's like allargando, dun 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 dun. What do you need the up tempo for? Dun 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 dun, bum 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 bum. I'm making a point, right? That is the whole thing. It's sort of like somebody scolding, right? Shaking a finger at their naughty little boy, for writing such an outrageous piece. It's almost like they're getting the finger wagged at them very, very emphatically. So you don't need to speed back up and then slow down again. Just make it an allargando all the way through. Yeah, and cuivre. Okay, so that's good. That will work. Yep. And what's the forte parentheses for? Right. So you already were forte. You don't even need to mark it again. Just cuivre. And then here you say you go to dolce. I would just say norm. Dun 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 dun, and then sforzando piano, and then I would just say norm. Right. So that allows the player to bring their lip shape back to, like, from being stretched to the sides back to the kind of normal shape in the middle. Yeah, and then when they push on the molto forte or the molto crescendo here, then it's not so, it's just not so freaking annoying. Yeah. But I mean, just so much great stuff. Yeah, this is toast. This celesta right in here. Nobody's going to hear it. This though, the glissando in parallels and so on. Like, nobody's going to hear the jump back. You might as well just make this, just glissandoing. Once you've set the pedal here, you don't really need to tell us all the pitches and so on. I think the player will get it. So now, back to the beginning. But before I really dig into a lot of this, I'd like to just sort of mention that I really love the proportions in here. Like, for instance, a lot of orchestrators are opting to, like, have a big swell right in here. And you just let the music stay soft and then shift it to the next section, right? Now, if we look at C, the section C, there's a little crescendo indicated right in here, which you left out perfectly fine. But yeah, I mean, not too intense. But I just really love the way that this kind of, like, you have a little push into the next section, rather than having it really, really build. So I mean, I'm not saying that either decision is right or wrong, but just more that it's that there was just something nice about the way you set this up. And and also just letting this be really calm in here, in the C section here, and like the allargando, don't worry about the reharmonization. I hear all and see all. It is fine. And I don't mind people changing around things so long as it, like, the context doesn't change so much that the meaning of the piece is lost. Yeah, and this is all really nice in here. Yeah, so, like, I mean, like, here you list all of your instruments. It would be really nice to have, like, I mean, if you absolutely have to stick with, with scoring it like this, maybe give us a glossary. It would be really nice. Yeah, and here, I'm just going to enlarge on the fence whether to use tenor sax or alto clarinet. I think both would be allowed, could be played on a B-flat clarinet for practicality. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's all good. That's all fine with me. It totally doesn't matter. I would just say, like, yeah, I mean, keeping in mind that the tenor saxophone, the tenor saxophone transposition is the same as the bass clarinet, right? It's sounding down a major ninth, right? So, so just like, if there were some, I'm thinking like some of the lowest possible notes of the tenor saxophone would be out of range of the standard clarinet. But, I mean, not too many. So, yeah, I mean, Yeah, and then yeah, and all the bass clarinet stuff and so on. All right, so all right, so just kind of going into this, I'm just really going to focus on the scoring, and I'm not going to worry too much about too many special effects. All right. Now, here you've got like you have a little pickup note, a pizzicato, and you have actually a fairly high pizzicato note right in here. And just to sort of point out that like lower harmonic pizzicato in the double bass, especially like octave harmonics, are really gorgeous. They're so beautiful. And so I think that like by going up to the like going all the way up to two octaves above the D string, I feel it's sort of lost. The effect is lost. Like here you could have had the pizzicato an octave lower, and I felt that it would have supported this so much better. And then here you were going to the octave harmonic of the G, and this is so much better. Now, what's really tragic here is that your mock-up may be really sophisticated, but it doesn't understand this, right? It does like octave or pizzicato harmonics in the double bass. I don't know what that is, right? So it kind of you just sort of get this kind of thunky sort of a sound, and it's really a shame that Yeah, I mean, I just feel that this an octave lower would just sound so much more beautiful, right? You just keep this. I mean, pretty much all these pitches could be played as octave harmonics. So like just so long as you keep it in the right octave, yeah, I just think it is so much better than like the two octave harmonic. All right, so we're starting off here fairly simple. We got piccolo and clarinet in octaves with the bassoons playing the harmony below. That's nice. And then here you have this big push. And I mean, it's nice. I mean, like the overall, the overall strength of this passage in orchestration, I feel, is to progress the texture, right? So it gives us more emotional information. And I mean, you certainly do here. Some might think, well, this is a bit of an exaggeration of the emotion, but I don't think so. One thing that I would say, though, is like, why mezzo piano? Why not just stick with piano and then push forward to mezzo piano, and then drop off a little bit to mezzo piano? I think. I just feel it sort of takes the teeth out. Because yeah, poco crescendo, yeah, you're right. Mezzo piano to mezzo forte is like blah to bleh, right? It's like, it's like ecru to beige. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I mean, they're both kind of grayish colors. So, giving just a little bit more of a running start from piano, I think just really would bring out way more emotion. Especially if you're going to bring in, timpani stroke right here in the middle of the bar and some horns. Yeah, so yeah, this is all work great, and then you just immediately you pull out of it really quickly. Yeah, and have a little bit of a caesura there, joint caesura by everybody. Yep. And then you just go right back into a more standard interpretation, like the exact same scoring that you had before with the little plucks. But the only thing that I would question here is why resolve, right? Da 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 bum ba da bum. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it sort of resolves in the piano part. So I mean, fair enough by bar 5, but I mean there isn't really a like there's a tonic G in the bar before in the 4th bar, but there really isn't one in the 5th bar, right? But anyways, I mean it's nitpicking. Ignore it. All right, and then the strings take over the melody. But da, da, da. And yeah, and see, like, this is nice. So here you have thrown in mezzo staccato, right? To get that dotted rhythm nice and tight. Yeah, I mean, do you sure you want this all to be tenuto staccato, right? So like dun, so it's da unga unga unga. It's like how many ungas can you put into your beautiful lyrical line? Yeah. So you want a little bit of glissando in here. That's all. That's all good. All right. Yeah. So yeah, has a kind of a jazzy contemporary sound. I'm seeing this in a lot of scores. The like circle around the the damping sign. I mean, most harpists will just go cross circle around the around the inside of the cross, not around the outside of it. I almost feel it's sort of. It almost looks like a gun sight when when it's got the circle around the outside. I mean, not that really matters, but I need to go check out some harp repertoire. I've never seen it with the circle around it, but that doesn't mean that I'm a huge expert on every bit of contemporary harp scoring. Yeah, so I mean, right in here, like, so long as your percussionists don't go too wild, I think the celesta and the harp are going to sound fine. And I think that this is all going to work out okay. I mean, I'll even give you a little bit of this sotto voce flute stuff in here, flutter tonguing and so on. It'll be a sort of a background. I mean, if you are willing to accept this as a sort of a backgroundy kind of a sound, with the English horn obviously just being much stronger in there, then it's all fine. Yeah, ba da 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 da, and all of the right. I'm not so sure this is necessary, but I mean, if that's what you feel there, score it. That's fine. Then a general pause. I don't think you really need to mark general pause on the second half of the bar. I would sort of save the general pause marking for for like an actual full bar myself. Okay, now here we get into the nitty gritty. So my big critique about a lot of what's going on in this page is I feel that the figuration, the left hand figuration, is a little weak, right? So like here we've got some bass clarinet and so on trading off with the with your violas, and it just really doesn't feel like it is enough. Like there's a little bit of flow or motion in the background. Just if there was some way to bring in more weight, more and you know what? You know who the biggest culprits are in weakening the figuration is footballs in the lower strings, right? So the sound of these instruments just holding notes clouds the motion, the sense of motion in the other parts, right? Because you just have this going on the entire time, so that stuff happening around it in bass clarinet and viola just gets sucked up. It just gets absorbed, right? So, like, I mean, if you really wanted to balance this out, might maybe going to Divisi, lower strings here and having half of the players playing the low notes and the other half of the players supporting what's going on bass clarinet and violas. And I think you would get a much more secure effect and less clouding of that function. And then right in here, like the bass clarinetist drops any kind of support for the figuration, and you can just get that little touch of it here and there in your violas. And then, as things go on, you've got the marimba kind of picking it up, along with the bass clarinet. And here you're saying solo, but I mean, I'm not seeing any room for it in the sound picture, right? With so much intensity going on in the middle register, and especially with such powerful, heavy brass right in here. I just don't see the, I mean, if you want them to play out here, I think shouldn't it be marked like forte? Like, shouldn't the solo be forte? Yeah. Right, and then we got some harp in here, and then the harp has got to deal with the strength of the trombones and the horns right in here. Supported by some support here by the bassoons is well taken, but I just don't see the balance right in there. Do you know what I mean? And then going on here, you've got this, and so on. But I don't where's the support from other elements, right? I don't feel that this is enough. Once again, the way that it's scored, this is probably the place in which the figuration has the most chance out of anywhere in the page, but it's still, I don't feel, is strong enough. I think if the part is going to play out, it should be marked louder, right? And so on. But yeah. All right. Yeah, so I like the sul tasto right in here. I think that's beautiful. I mean, we'll feel we'll sort of hear or feel the velvety sound below of the strings right in here. Taking the excuse me, taking the harmony right in there. And you've got a little bit of doubling from some parts, but like the excuse me. Like we've got clarinet on the top voice and tenor saxophone on the bottom voice here, first and second. And then above, we've got this lovely combination, a due soli with the oboe, and then English horn an octave lower. If there's any voice here that is too weak, it's really the English horn, right? Because you've got triple the weight above and just like this one single line below. I noticed in the mock-up that it is so powerful on the flutes, and the flute sound is a single flute sound, is what it really sounds like. Whereas all three of these players playing together would try to match their timbre, so you'd get this kind of indescribable, wonderful, bright sound there, but not as expressive. Right? You're saying in a song-like style, but with so much doubling, the players can't really be too expressive with their vibrato, or they get off track with each other, right? And that's the same problem with a due or a two oboes, right? It the players have to control to a certain degree. They can't be quite as free. Right, and then, dun da dum, once again, mezzo piano crescendo to mezzo forte. Why not just piano crescendo to mezzo forte? Yeah. Yeah, and, very funny right in here. Da da do. Okay. All right, so B. It's kind of fun. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's very cinematic, almost Hollywood-like in a lot of these gestures, or concert band-like in a lot of places. Sorry, my cat is trying to get in on it. He wants his orchestration lesson too. Yeah, I don't see any big problems here. Okay, so now we head to this big, this kind of reaching for the sky kind of moment here. So, so long as you keep everything nice and soft, I think that this will work really, really well. And here, I'll grant you tuba and horns balancing to the ensemble. So, they're a little loud on the mock-up, but they will bring themselves down, right? But if you really want to nail your mock-up, bring down the dynamics here. Okay. Yeah. All right, so marimba, staccato, along with all this smooth stuff going on. I mean, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Dong, dong, dong. And then the little celesta arcing downwards, clarinets and flutes above, and so on. The little sound here from the piccolo. So yeah, so my big comment on these 6 bars is that you do a ton of management of the texture, which is great, and you do like some very, very careful balancing and combining of I'm not so sure about this scoop right here. Yeah. And yeah, and the and the effect is really nice. I wonder about like any kind of dynamic arc that might go in here. And I'm also wondering about contrast, right? Because like you use a lot of the same elements again, right? Sometimes you add something, like you'll add the bassoons here, but like once again we have the same we have kind of a real similar texture to what happened before. The same horns, the same strings above, and it like the thing that is the most different is the roll here in timpani, right? Which, yeah, I mean, any way to keep this softer would really be helpful, because it seems to me like there's a danger here. Like, what is Barvinsky trying to state here? Like with his wandering melody, like is how the flowing of whatever that energy is from intended with the left hand part sort of spills over and kind of goes wandering. So like there's a real risk that some of the effects and some of the really cool stuff that you've thrown in here may, like the cymbals and the timpani and so on, will distract from just the very simple idea, like and some of what's going on in here will just really distract from the very simple idea of the wandering solo, right? It's just has it's very, very cushioned. All of it is very cushioned with texture. And then here, like, what is the piano score? It sets up the melody with a little bit of accompaniment, and then the accompaniment drops out, and the melody just goes wandering down without any kind of accompaniment whatsoever. But here, it's very, very much accompanied by lots of texture around it, right? So, like, it seems to me that, like, a lot of your approach as an orchestrator is just really, just heavily textured, lots of things going on all the time. And I'm wondering, like, could you basically just let one instrument say one thing with nobody else playing, right? How much ingenuity would you bring to that, right? To that task? Because I think you're an excellent orchestrator here, but I'm just wondering if sometimes the proportions get to be like adding things maybe in places where they don't need to be added. Yeah. I mean, there's no denying, though, like the scoring of this is great. It's absolutely gorgeous. But but is it all necessary, right? Like to for the emotion of what is happening there. And once again, I say go back to the piano score. What is happening in the piano score? What is the player expressing, and how can we build on that towards something unique to us, right? But I mean, I love the way you come out of this to a held note right there. Yeah. Okay. So here we get to like what I have uh, termed as calm surface over restless undercurrent. So like you're expressing that with a roll here, which I think this is snare drum, and we got the melody and harmony expressed in harp here, and that is being doubled by the strings and horns. So like here is where I would absolutely try to balance everything, like kind of playing around a little bit with adjusting. Like here's where I sort of break my this kind of situation is where I sort of break my own rules or stretch my own rules on not doing harmonic mixing, not having a different dynamic on each part. I say strings, winds, and and so on, like they should be piano here, right? I think that the harp needs to be louder, like you're saying, with strings and horns. Well, the horns are sucking the life out of this harp part. The horn should be pianissimo. The string part could be up to mezzo forte. And the question is like whether or not you want this to be non-arpeggiando. You kind of don't really mark, or you want it to just really be like ching, 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 right? Or brim, brim, brim. Like I think actually like just a big glorious arpeggiando style right there might really beautifully bring out the harp. But it definitely needs to be louder in there in the context of the scoring. And I really like these little dun da da ideas here, like you're saying fanfare, right? But just really keep it soft. But these guys here, they just really need support. And once again, the held G's here are what is partially what is making them smeary and lacking in this function is lacking in clarity, right? And it's because of the basses. I mean, if there is a way of expressing this low note very lightly, like half of your basses, or even just a single bass player, or maybe two bass players down there, but the other bass players helping out, lending a hand here, giving some definition to the motion in here. Which, I mean, you can hear it in the mock-up too. In this case, the mock-up is not lying to you. It really is going to be difficult for this function to come through. Anyways, I mean, like it's a gorgeous score. I mean, I'm sitting around and picking it apart, and I mean, of course, that's why you sent it to me, is so that I could like comment on this and that, and in this kind of form, there's absolutely zero necessity for you to defend any decision or clarify anything or whatever. It's there's like it's completely harmless and non-accusatory. Like if there's anything I said that can help you, that's great. If I said a few things you don't quite agree with, that's fine too. If I got something totally wrong, you could mention it in the comments, or if there's something that I asked about that you want to clarify, that's cool too. But you've got you have nothing to excuse yourself for. I think it was really a great piece of work here. And with your sense of finesse and adding little things and so on, like I think that there's a lot here that is really ready for the stands. So if any of my comments helped it get even more ready, then that's great. But like that kind of effort, what it ends up putting on the orchestrator is the responsibility of getting it played. So, if you know somebody who knows somebody who wants to put on a piece of Ukrainian music, beautifully orchestrated and with a lot of fun stuff in it, then you've got the score for it right here. But, I mean, all that aside, all I can do is just say thank you so much, Jon Martin, for joining our little effort here, for your contribution to the appeal for Ukrainian musicians. It's so helpful, so thoughtful of you to be part of that, and for spending, oh man, you must have spent so many hours of time working on this score, perfecting all the different parts and balancing everything and thinking things out. And, I can only apologize a little bit if a few of my comments, misunderstood or may have felt that they were trivializing some of your efforts and some of your meaning just out of my own ignorance. And apologies too for the language difference and any comments that I might have made on it that might have seemed a little annoying or pointless. But the thing about it is, I would just really like to understand more of what's going on in your score, and with the huge pressure of time that I have in evaluating hundreds of scores as it's turning out, this is the sort of calculating. So this is my 74th Patreon score plus 68 website evaluations that I did. So, you do the math on that, right? It's just a limited amount of time I could use to look things up and translate and everything else. So if you can make it more understandable to me and everybody else, it's hugely appreciated, and I don't want to put that burden on you, but it really is like something that would help me a lot. And it probably wouldn't be all that necessary in a normal situation. It's just that you've added so many markings. There are dozens of markings on each page. Sometimes, so it's kind of hard for me to keep up with all of them. Okay, but once again, just back to the main point that I'm trying to make here at the end, and that is that I just really appreciate that your participation this year, and I'm so thankful for the lovely way that you are giving other people feedback and jumping in on their scores and helping them out and being so positive. And that really is part of the spirit of Orchestration Online. Is like we put our egos aside and we just help improve each other. And the result is there are so many people out there in the community who have helped each other get better and better and better. And some people are now teaching at either with their own teaching practices or at universities. And there are people that have got jobs now in the industry, like film and television and so on. And some people who are establishing themselves as concert composers. And it's all happened over the past dozen years or so. And, I wish I could take a lot of credit for that, but I feel it's really a community effort. Everybody has just been pitching in, and you've been one of those people. And I really appreciate that. I'm thankful for that. And so have a lot of other people out there, website subscribers, Patreon supporters, viewers of this channel, people on Facebook. You've all just been really awesome. And, here I am at the, it's been, I guess, 9 years since I started the Facebook group, and, plus 2 or 3 more years since the start of the channel and so on. I just really feel blessed. So thanks everybody for being a part of that. So I will have more cool stuff for you coming up. There really are a lot of just titanically intense scores. I don't know how I'm going to make it through today, evaluating all of them. They're all going to take a lot of time to explain and to go over and to talk through. So just bear with me, stick with me, and somehow we are going to make it through till Christmas with me having evaluated all the remaining dozen scores or so. All right? So I'll see you for the next one really soon.